In August 1935, Max Sattelmeyer and Karl Mehringer decided to try something that had never been done before: summit the Eiger by the North Face. These two men from Bavaria, Germany, were meticulous planners and skilled climbers. However, no serious climb up the North Face had ever occurred. They had no information about this face. All they could do was look up the mountain from Klein Scheidegg and plan a route up the face with no way of knowing if it could actually be accomplished until they got on the mountain. At 2 o'clock in the morning, they began their ascent. For the first 2 days, the weather held and they made great progress, passing the first ice field. On the third day, a thunderstorm rolled in, obscuring visibility from the observers below. The temperature dropped to -8 degrees Celsius. For the next 2 days, the mountain remained covered in clouds and snow. No one could see what had happened to the two climbers. On the fifth day, the clouds briefly broke, and the climbers were still making progress, higher up on the mountain. The visitors in Klein Scheidegg lined up to peer through binoculars to have a peek at the bold climbers tackling the North Face just before the clouds covered them again. The next time the face was viewed, there was no sign of the climbers. Their bodies were recovered from a ledge at 3,300 meters. This location was to be known as Death Bivouac. The fame of the North Face of the Eiger was now set. Tourists would come, have lunch, peering through binoculars, watching climbers risk their lives attempting to conquer the murder wall. The Eiger is one of the most emblematic and recognizable peaks in the Swiss Alps. The southern side of the mountain faces the most glaciated region of the Alps. The west side provides a route to the summit that was conquered in 1858. The east face is covered by the ice sea, which forms the upper part of the lower Grindelwald Glacier. The north face is one of the three great north faces of the Alps, including the Matterhorn and the Grand Joris, known as the Trilogy. The north face towers over the valley of Grindelwald, including the town of Klein Scheidegg. Here, there is a wonderful ski resort that attracts many tourists every year. Furthermore, there are establishments that have telescopes for spectators to view the climbers on the north face from below. The tourists may arrive by rail that passes through the north face, where windows provide views from the face of the mountain. In 1938, the North Face was called, by the Alpine Journal, an obsession for the mentally deranged and the most imbecile variant since mountaineering first began. Word spread across Europe of the attempt of Sattelmeyer and Mehringer. Though their attempt ended in tragedy, they had scaled far up the face, and their deaths would bring even more fame and notoriety to climbers that would first summit the Eiger by the North Face. In the summer of 1936, 12 experienced and well-known climbers waited in the valley below the mountain. The weather this summer was one of the worst to date, soaking the face and making climbing impossible. While they were waiting, they made short training climbs. During one of these climbs, one of the climbers fell to his death. Because the weather was not letting up and one of the climbers had already died, many of the climbers gave up and went home. When the weather finally cleared, only 4 climbers were left. 2 Bavarians, Andres Hinterstoisser and Toni Kurz, and 2 Austrians, Willi Angerer and Eddie Rainer. Hinterstoisser and Kurz were childhood friends, born and raised in Bavaria, Germany. Kurz was a pipe fitter, and Hinterstoisser worked in a bank before they both joined the military of Nazi Germany in 1935. They climbed many mountains in the Alps, and became excellent and well-known climbers in the area, even at such a young age. The 2 Austrians, Angerer and Rainer, studied the tragic ascent of Mehringer and Sattelmeyer. Rainer was 22 and Angerer was the oldest of the group at only 30 years old. Angerer and Rainer had explored the base and made an attempt on July 6th that had been forced back by icy conditions. The German group also made a few test runs to test the condition of the face. On one of these test runs, Hinterstoisser fell 121 feet but was not injured. They rested and began their ascent a couple of days later. Over the first 2 days, the climbers made quick progress until they reached a flat, smooth portion of the face that required 100% commitment. People began to gather in the valley below, watching the men either conquer the face or die trying. Hinterstoicer led the way, securing a line, high on the face and performing a tension traverse to cross the flat, slick rock. This area is now known as the Hinterstoicer Traverse. This traverse opened up the mountain above them to the portion called Flatiron and the Death Bivouac where Sedlmayr and Mehringer had died the year before. However, instead of continuing up the mountain to fame and glory, they began to descend. The day before, as they crossed the first ice field, Angerer had been struck by a falling rock. He had been injured but pressed on. Now, he was unable to continue, and the group decided to get him down off of the mountain to seek medical attention. During the descent, the weather turned. As the spectators watched from below, through intermittent clouds, rocks and ice constantly fell down from above, pounding the climbers. They now fought their way to the traverse when they realized that they had made a terrible mistake. Hinterstoicer had removed the rope from the traverse. Now they had to cross the smooth rock face again, without a secure line, but now the face was covered by a sheet of ice. He tried, but crossing the face proved to be impossible. They decided that their only way off of the mountain was straight down, but this came with its own dangers. As they descended straight down the face, they had to traverse overhangs that left them dangling away from the mountain. As the climbers were fighting to get off of the mountain face, an avalanche came bearing down from above. The mass of falling snow and rock dislodged Hinterstoicer's anchor, and he fell to his death. A falling rock struck Angerer, killing him instantly, causing him to fall off of the wall and catch at the end of his rope, leaving his lifeless body dangling in midair. The weight of Angerer's body slammed Rainer into the wall as the dislodged anchor whipped through the air, hitting him in the face and smashing his jaw, and wrapping him in rope, where in a short minute he died from asphyxiation. Kurtz was now on his own, dangling from his rope off the side of the mountain, with the mountain face completely out of reach. That night, an Eiger railway guard, exploring the tunnels, heard a shout and opened one of the windows on the face. He could hear Kurtz calling for help. He immediately alerted the mountain guides that the climbers needed to be rescued. The rescue party immediately took a train up the inside of the mountain and crawled out of the window onto the face. They couldn't make it to Kurtz, but reassured him that they would make a plan and be back in the morning. He just needed to make it through the night, dangling by a single rope, battered and bruised in the blistering cold. The next morning, the rescue team exited the window and climbed up the face to just 40 meters below Kurtz. Because of the overhang, they weren't able to get any closer to him, and the weather conditions had taken their toll. Kurtz's hands were now frostbitten, and he could barely move his fingers. It took an agonizingly long time, but Kurtz eventually was able to pull up enough rope that he could descend to the rescue party. To gather the required rope, Kurtz had to cut loose Angerer's body that was attached below him. He then climbed up and cut loose Rainer's body. In total, this took 5 hours. Furthermore, he now had 3 lengths of rope to tie together to get the length that he needed to get down to the other climbers. He was eventually able to get the ropes tied together, and he began to descend along the ropes when he reached a knot joining the 2 lower ropes, and his carabiner became jammed on the knot. He was stuck only 5 meters above the rescue team. Arnold Gladhart was on the rescue team and was communicating with Kurtz. He told Kurtz to cut the rope. The rescue team had enough men to catch him. Just cut the rope, he would fall 5 meters and they would get him off the mountain. But by now, Kurtz's fingers were completely frozen. They encouraged him over and over as he tried desperately to cut the rope, but he couldn't. One of the guides climbed onto the shoulders of another, reaching up with a pick. He touched the bottom of Kurtz's crampons as he dangled, but the guide could do no more. After more than 24 hours since the rescue attempt began, Kurtz uttered the words, "I can't go on anymore," and died dangling just 5 meters above his would-be rescuers. The entire event was viewed by the spectators at the base of the mountain. This included reporters that spread the word of the tragedy of Tony Kurtz. The north face of the Eiger was now more popular than ever, and it was only a matter of time before it would be conquered. In July of 1938, 2 groups, the German pair Andres Heckmeyer and Ludwig Vorg, and Austrian pair Heinrich Harrer and Fritz Kasparek. The Austrian pair had begun their ascent a day before the Germans at 2 a.m. on July 21st and made it past the Hinterstoicer Traverse by laying their own line. Heinrich had left his crampons at the base, so they were making slow progress. Aided by the line left by the Austrians, the German pair that left a day later quickly caught up to the Austrians. They had a plan to bivouac during the afternoons. This was the worst time to be on the side of the mountain, because the warmer weather would cause rocks and ice to break away, careening down the face. The two teams rested together during the afternoon of the 22nd. The two teams continued to climb as separate groups until they reached the Traverse of the Gods, where they joined forces. As they crossed the Traverse of the Gods and approached the Spider, a terrible storm rolled over the face of the mountain. At this point, the German team was leading. They shouted back to the Austrians as they were all being pummeled with blistering wind and snow that they would move into the Spider and seek shelter from the storm. The Germans ascended into the Spider as the Austrians waited. After several hours, all of a sudden they heard a scream and a large amount of snow fell from above them. Heckmeyer lost his grip, slid down. Vorg was directly below Heckmeyer and raised his hands to lessen the blow. Heckmeyer's crampons stabbed directly into Vorg's hands as Vorg caught Heckmeyer. Now Vorg's hands were torn apart and blood was everywhere. Heckmeyer looked down at Vorg, who was covered in blood and in shock. Heckmeyer took out a bottle of amphetamines and poured half of the bottle down Vorg's throat. This was well more than the doctor recommended dosage, then poured the other half down his own. Kesprick, 30 meters above Heinrich, began to shout down that an avalanche was coming. Heinrich grabbed onto the wall and pressed his body against it as tightly as he could and placed his rucksack over his head. Avalanche after avalanche poured over him as he held on for his life. When the avalanche finally stopped, Heinrich believed that he was the only one left on the face, but they were all still there. They attacked the exit cracks through the storm and made it to the summit on July 24, 1938. They were the first to reach the summit by the north face. They had just enough strength to make their descent in the middle of a ferocious blizzard. With modern technology and established routes, the fastest ascent of the north face is currently 2 hours and 47 minutes. But it remains that 64 lives have been lost on the north face of the Eiger. A beautiful and challenging climb in the best of conditions can become tragic in the blink of an eye. This is True Mysteries. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.